Hey guys, this is Cave. I'm a teacher at Roseville Area High School, and today I'm joined by Nick Palladian Esquire. Nick is an attorney for the Legal Rights Center in Minneapolis. Welcome back, Nick.
James, good to see you again. Long time no see.
It's been a while. So today is what? Thursday, April 15th. And the defense rested their case. Derek Chauvin did not take the stand. What do you think about how the defense did?
The defense worked with what they had again in seemingly a really bad factual case for them. They did bring in that use of force expert who I thought was atrocious. I thought he was very lacking in credibility, to put it mildly. There was and I think you watched the cross-examination that the state did on him, but I mean, he was up there saying what Derek Chauvin did wasn't even a use of force. And eventually he came around to agree on cross-exam that it was a use of force, but that just seems absurd to me. So I thought the state really tore that witness apart and really made the defense look silly. Now I say this of that's like obviously seemingly the one person in the country that they could find who would agree to say, yep, I'll come in and that's how I feel. So they worked with what they have. So that part wasn't well in terms of the use of force. Regarding the medical testimony, the cause of death, which is what I think the defense really has to hang their hat on, I thought that actually went pretty well for the defense. The doctor that they had was the coroner equivalent to the chief medical examiner for Maryland. And he'd been in that role for many years. He's worked on hundreds, if not thousands of cases. So he wasn't just kind of some schlub off the street, who didn't have any experience. He was in a position of a lot of responsibility and authority, pronouncing reasons for death and things like that. So he presented well. He knows how to talk to a jury. He would look to the jurors and talk to them, and engage with them a little bit. So I think he was sort of the defense's equivalent to Dr. Tobin, who was the gentleman with the Irish accent, who, the jurors seemed to love. He was engaging with them and really enrapturing. And this was, I think, more on that level. And I think he did throw some things out there, right? There was talk about potential carbon monoxide poisoning. Ultimately, I think his determination was that we don't know what caused the death. The cause of death is undetermined. And the defense will hammer that all the way home to say, look, the state gave you 6 experts. All of them sort of had some at least little differing things to say. 6 different versions, plus my guy came in and told you that we can't truly know what happened. So I don't know if that gets them a win, but I think they did as well as they could have. And I thought the doctor was much more effective than the use of force expert.
So we'll get back to this particular trial in just a second, but could you explain to us that? So next week, the jury will deliberate and they're going to be sequestered. Could you explain a lot of question about how many jurors have to say guilty versus not guilty, and what are the different things that a jury can do in general, but then also maybe specific to this case?
Yeah, so if you've seen the movie 12 Angry Men, 1957, really old movie, but people should watch.
I'm sure everybody watching this has. So
yes, exactly. So I'm preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
So yeah, the decision has to be unanimous, right? Whether it's guilty or not guilty, either way, everyone has to agree. And if they can't agree on that specific charge, they can't come to a conclusion on that. And I was talking with some coworkers. The question was, well, if they convict on, let's say they convict on second-degree manslaughter, but they can't agree on the other 2, does that mean they were just convicted on one and then it's a mistrial for the other 2? Or is the whole thing a mistrial? And I'm honestly not sure. I want to say it varies by state, but big picture, for the trial to fully be completed, presumably, it has to be unanimous on each count and each charge.
Okay. And it will be unanimous. The judge will say, stay there until it's 12-0 or 0-12.
I think that, so there are really nuanced limits on what the judge can or will say to them, right? Because what we don't want is them to make a decision out of pressure, right? By saying, oh man, the judge is mad at us. He's not going to let us leave until we come up with a decision.
Yeah.
That's a strong argument for violation of due process and a mistrial. So the judge typically just tells them, keep deliberating, right?
Yeah.
And at some point, I don't, there's no specific time on it, but if the jurors send back a note saying, we've been at it for 5 days, no one is budging, we are declaring ourselves a hung jury, we are not going to come to a conclusion at that point, then the judge could bring them in and declare a mistrial. But it's really more art than science, I would say.
Mistrial means we start this whole thing again.
Yeah, so mistrial would mean exactly, the state would have the option to bring back charges or not bring back charges. I think you could bet your bottom dollar that they would absolutely bring back charges, and yeah, we'd have to do this again.
Okay, so back to the trial, I guess specifically. So it seemed like the prosecution spent 2 weeks with witnesses, and the defense had 2 days. Why? Why is it usually that way, or is it? Why? That seems like really skewed to me.
Totally, and it is. You're absolutely right. And the reason for that is the state is the one who always has the burden of proof, right? So the defense doesn't have to prove or disprove anything. They're presumed innocent, right? You walk in, no matter what video is out there for the public to see, no matter what recordings are out there, until all of those things are in evidence, and even until the jury makes its decision, you've got that presumption, that cloak of innocence. So the state is going to bring in all of these witnesses to build their case and be able to tell the jury, hey, jury, we charged this person with doing this act. Here is all the evidence, and therefore here are all the reasons why we've met our burden of proof, right? If the state doesn't bring in those folks, if they miss a witness, if they didn't call, let's say they called one pulmonologist instead of all of these different types of doctors, the defense could get up there without putting on their own witnesses. And a lot of times defense teams don't put on any witnesses. They just rely on cross-examination. And it would make their job easier to say, hey, the state failed. They didn't prove their case, right? And the state would go back there thinking, crap, like I should have called this witness. I should have gotten this piece of evidence in there. So it's always going to be, almost always going to be a little one-sided in terms of the length of the presentation.
So that's what we saw is pretty typical.
Yeah. I wonder, depending on how deep Derek Chauvin's pockets were, or how deep the police federation, whoever's paying for it.
Yep.
If it's Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos or Oprah, I'm assuming they'll bring in just as many medical experts. So I think it was likely limited to some extent in that capacity.
Okay.
But fairly typical for the average person.
Okay. Defense rested. Since it's so close to the weekend, the judge, nice guy, said, hey, jury, go home. Is there any restriction on them besides what he's always said? Don't read the news about this trial.
Yeah, so so far, no, there are no new restrictions, right? The whole time they're not allowed to tell people that they're on this case. Realistically, their family, their friends, and their coworkers are, I'm sure, putting 2 and 2 together. But they're not supposed to talk about the case. They can't even talk with each other about the case. Okay. You've got to save all of that for the deliberation room. Obviously, like we've talked about many times before, and like anyone has sort of come to see, is that it's really hard to stay away from anything in the news. So I think you have to be actively, and we have to be relying on these jurors to be actively avoiding any sort of media. But beyond that, same old restrictions until they're officially charged with the case and are sequestered.
Same old restrictions, which are really no restrictions.
Yeah.
Other than self-monitoring. So the jury won't deliberate yet. There's one more step in the trial process. What are we going to see on Monday before the jury goes to deliberate?
Yeah, so Monday is what we're going to see where the really juicy part is, for lack of a better term. It's the closing arguments, right? That's what everyone thinks of as the exciting parts. The evidence is now in. There's no new evidence coming in. So we started with this empty box. and the parties came and filled that box with what they're going to bring to the jury. So statements, videos, audio recordings, testimony, all those things. Now is when the attorneys get to be a little feisty and get fired up and really bring in those emotional arguments to say, hey, jurors, it's no longer opening statements where we're going to preview objectively what's happening. We are going to come in guns hot and tell you exactly what this evidence means, how you should interpret it, and why you should interpret it that way. And I think you're going to see a lot more emotion here. You're going to see a lot more dramatics and theatrics. So it's really going to be the culmination of all of this, and it's when the gloves can sort of come off.
Okay. And then, as I mentioned earlier, and we did an episode where we talked about this, the judge told the jury, okay, pack for a while. Monday after the closing arguments, which could last several hours.
Yeah, potentially. I think the state is going to march through all three of those stages piece by piece by piece. I think, you had mentioned this. They're absolutely going to play those videos again and again. They're going to reference those. You've got medical testimony from 6 different people, and they're going to have to address the defense's arguments too.
Yeah. So
they're going to be very thorough. They're going to have to find that line between not putting the jury to sleep, but also covering their bases. So it could be, I would imagine it'd be a few hours.
Okay.
From each side potentially. The last thing, I shouldn't say the last thing, some judges do it differently, but one thing that will also happen is the judge will read out loud to the jury instructions. That is a long, boring, and tedious process. It's many, many pages. It's a lot of legalese. Those are the instructions that the jury will take back with them into the room. So they'll have copies and they can read it for themselves. But because you're creating a record of everything that happened, the judge will not only give it to them, but he'll read it out loud to say, there you go, it's on the record, here's what I read to you. So I would imagine a whole day of closings as well as the reading of the jury instructions.
So the jury will be sequestered, which means that they are in a undisclosed hotel somewhere. Hennepin County will drive them to the courthouse back and forth. No phones, no news, no nothing, I'm assuming.
That's my understanding. It's going to be, you live in this bubble of this trial now.
Okay. So then you're thinking Monday for sure we won't hear from the jury, even though in a regular case technically we could, but you're thinking a couple hours plus then an extended jury directions or instructions. So I wonder if Judge Cahill will just say, okay, jury will reconvene tomorrow, 9:00. You let us know, at that point when you're ready, or will he have them deliberate a little bit on Monday?
That's a really good question. Typically the first thing that the jurors will do is they'll pick their foreperson, right? So they'll pick who's going to sort of be the leader of the jury. And judges like to use, as we've seen with Judge Cahill too, judges like to use all the time that they have. So say they finish up at, realistically, anytime before 4 o'clock. He'll say, hey, you know what, we've got half an hour. Let's have you guys at least go get started and pick a foreperson.
Okay.
If it turns into 5:36, maybe not at that point. But yeah, after once they sort of get going, then everyone's kind of holding their breath, waiting for the jury.
Well, while we're talking about it, I might as well ask one more question. So Tuesday, where is Derek Chauvin? Where are the attorneys? Where's the judge as they wait? Are they at home? Do they have to go and sit in the courtroom every day for, from 9 a.m. until 6 p.m, waiting for this? Or, what goes on? Where are these people while the jury's deliberating? Because it could come through any time. They could have their verdict at any moment, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And what they do is they direct everybody to be within 15 minutes standby.
Okay.
So they'll say, hey, you know what? You can go back to your office. You can go get lunch. You can go home. Go wherever, but just be here, be within a 15-minute radius, because if we get a verdict, y'all need to be back here as soon as possible. Another thing to watch out for, and I would imagine, I would be shocked if it didn't happen in this case, is if the jury comes back with a question,
Mm.
they also need all the parties back and present to talk about the question and figure out what, if anything, to say to the jury. So the jury could, for example, say, well, Judge, we have a question of the meaning substantial causal factor. We are confused by that. Can you explain it? Right. So that what they would do is they would write that on a little sheet of paper. They'd write the time and date that they wrote that question. They would give it to the bailiff who's with them. The bailiff would then deliver that to the judge's clerk, and they would say, the jury has a question, here is the question. The clerk would scan that, email it to all the attorneys, obviously let the judge know at the same time, and then they would all meet back at the courtroom. The judge would read the question out loud on the record, and then they would discuss as all the parties to say, here's the question, what should we do with this question? So they'll do that all on the record, and everyone's got to be there for that. So Derek Chauvin needs to be there, the defense attorney needs to be there, all those things. So those things could also happen at any time too.
Could the jury, I assume no, but can the jury ask, we want to ask a question of one of the witnesses?
Yeah, good question. No, that won't happen. All the evidence is already in. So, if that were the case, the judge would say, nope, you are to make your decision based on the evidence that's already in the case. Now, it is different if they want to watch video. So typically video in a case in Minnesota doesn't go back with the jury into the deliberation room. If they want to watch the video, they write a note saying, Judge, we want to watch the video. And then all the parties come back in, and then you play the video in its entirety and you watch the whole video. They bring out like one of those big wheelie cart media things. Then they send them back. So they typically they're not back there with a laptop and CDs to view it themselves. Okay. I feel like I heard something during one of the motions that the jury is going to have a laptop back with them. Okay. So they might just have free reign to watch and review videos as they see fit. I could have misheard that, but that'll be really interesting if that's the case, because I imagine there's so much video here, and obviously the video is super impactful, so they will absolutely want to review that.
Is the bailiff the same person the whole time, or do they get to change bailiffs? You said the bailiff is back in the jury room. I mean, is it the same person for all that time, or do they have a rotation? I mean, how boring would that be?
Yeah, good question. My hunch is they rotate shifts. Okay. So I would assume it's, you do your 8 hours, I'll do my 8 hours with them. But I don't know that definitively. That is a good question.
And what are they going to eat? Do they have to bring their own lunch from home? Do they get catered? Is there a special jury chef?
Yeah, the court usually provides lunch for them. So there's a cafe in the Hennepin County Government Center that, I can't remember the name of it, but they have a contract with the county to provide jurors lunches. So the jurors get a menu and they can choose from, it's nothing super fancy. It's like a type of sandwich or something like that. Otherwise, sometimes the jurors can walk down there together. The deputy will walk with them, and it's, cafeteria style. So you can say, hey, I'm going to get pizza. I'm going to get a burger. You're a teacher, right? When you go on a field trip, you say, kids, go get your whatever you're going to get, and then meet me back here. Sometimes it works like that too.
We're in a pandemic, so haven't had a field trip in a while.
Very true. Virtual field trips are probably not not common.
No lunch included with that, virtual field trips. So if they have to be 15 minutes away, the interested parties, and Derek Chauvin is out on bail.
Right.
Is he just in a hotel somewhere, 15 minutes around? Is he slumming on a friend's couch? Where do you think Derek Chauvin is?
Yeah, I have no idea. Because he's also he's got these other charges, right? And he either is or is going through a divorce. So who knows if he even has his own home anymore, if he's welcome in that home, if he's staying with a friend. I have no idea. I would assume he just goes back somewhere and, sits in the house or sits in the backyard, but obviously it's not going to be someplace public. I can't imagine him going out to a restaurant or to a bar and not being recognized by somebody. So I would assume he probably just stays at wherever he's calling home right now.
Yeah. Well, thank you. These are all the questions that I think everyone wants to know. Like, that's a long shift, 8 hours if you're a bailiff. So anyway, I hope they get good sandwiches. Anyway, Nick, so thank you. We'll probably meet. There's nothing we're privy of, or privy to, excuse me, about the deliberations. So after Monday, there's nothing for us to talk about until the verdict, correct?
Yeah, we just sit and wait and look at our crystal balls.
Okay. Good idea. Good idea. All right, Nick, thank you very much. As always, we appreciate it. And maybe we'll do one of these on Monday after closing arguments. And then, I don't know, probably when the verdict comes out. All right. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, James. Take care.
Of course.